Loss of empathy. It doesn't happen overnight, and that's what makes it dangerous. At first, it's small moments where someone ignores another person's pain because it's inconvenient. Then it grows into something colder, where emotions starts to feel distant and unreal. The brain adapts by numbing itself, especially after repeated exposure to stress or trauma. But here's the problem. When empathy fades, people stop seeing others as human and start seeing them as obstacles or tools. This is where it gets worse. Without empathy, guilt disappears, and without guilt, there are no internal limits. History shows that some of the most brutal actions weren't driven by rage, but by complete emotional detachment. The real danger is that this shift often feels normal to the person experiencing it, like they're simply becoming stronger or more logical, when in reality, they're losing the very thing that keeps their behavior in check. Justification. Nobody wakes up thinking they're the villain. Instead, the mind builds a story that makes every harmful action feel necessary. It starts with simple reasoning, like believing someone deserved it, or that the outcome will lead to something better. But this is where it gets worse. The brain is incredibly good at rewriting reality to protect your self-image. Over time, people don't just excuse their actions, they believe in them completely. This creates a feedback loop where each bad decision becomes easier to repeat. The real danger is that justification removes accountability. When someone believes they are right, there is no reason to stop. Entire systems of oppression and violence have been built on this exact mechanism, where people convince themselves they were acting for the greater good while causing massive harm. Power and control. Give someone power and you start to see who they really are. But more importantly, power changes people in ways they don't expect. At first, it feels like control over situations, then it slowly turns into control over people. This is where it gets dangerous. The brain begins to associate dominance with reward, releasing dopamine when authority is exercised. But here's the problem. The more control someone has, the less they feel restricted by rules or consequences. This creates a gap between them and everyone else, where normal moral boundaries no longer apply. The real danger is that power can remove empathy while amplifying ego. In extreme cases, people begin to see others as inferior, disposable, or insignificant. And once that mindset takes hold, harmful behavior no longer feels wrong. It feels justified, even necessary. Fear and survival instincts. Some of the darkest actions come not from hatred, but from fear. When people feel threatened, their brain shifts into survival mode, prioritizing safety over morality. This is where it gets worse. In high-stress situations, rational thinking shuts down and instinct takes over. People may act aggressively, betray others, or make choices they would never consider under normal conditions. But here's the problem. Once someone crosses that line, it becomes easier to do it again. The brain learns that extreme actions can solve immediate threats, reinforcing the behavior. The real danger is that fear doesn't always disappear when the threat is gone. It lingers, reshaping how someone sees the world, making them more defensive, more suspicious, and more willing to harm others preemptively. Dehumanization. The moment someone stops seeing others as fully human, everything changes. It often begins with labels, reducing people to stereotypes, enemies, or categories instead of individuals. This is where it gets worse. Language plays a powerful role because once people are described as less than human, empathy becomes easier to ignore. But here's the problem. Dehumanization removes the emotional barrier that prevents cruelty. It allows people to justify actions they would never consider against someone they relate to. The real danger is that this process can happen slowly and subtly, often influenced by culture, media, or social groups. By the time it fully takes hold, harmful behavior doesn't feel like harm at all. It feels like dealing with something that doesn't deserve compassion, resentment, and envy. These emotions build quietly, but they can become incredibly destructive over time. It starts with comparison, noticing what others have that you don't. Then it turns into frustration and eventually bitterness. This is where it gets dangerous. The mind begins to focus on perceived unfairness, creating a narrative where others are responsible for your struggles. But here's the problem. Resentment doesn't just stay internal, it looks for an outlet. People may begin to justify harming others as a way to restore balance or get even. The real danger is that envy distorts reality, making someone else's success feel like a personal attack. In extreme cases, this can lead to actions driven not by gain, but by the desire to see others lose. Desensitization. The first time someone witnesses or commits something harmful, it feels intense and uncomfortable. But repetition changes everything. Each exposure reduces the emotional impact, making the next experience easier to handle. This is where it gets worse. Over time, actions that once felt extreme start to feel normal. But here's the problem. As sensitivity decreases, the threshold for what feels wrong keeps shifting. People may escalate their behavior simply because previous actions no longer create the same reaction. The real danger is that desensitization doesn't require intention. It can happen through media, environment, or repeated experiences. By the time someone realizes what's happening, their sense of right and wrong may already be significantly altered. Isolation. When someone is cut off from others, their perspective begins to change in dangerous ways. Human connection acts as a mirror, reflecting behavior and keeping thoughts grounded. Without it, people are left alone with their own interpretations. This is where it gets worse. Isolation can amplify negative thoughts, turning minor frustrations into major grievances. But here's the problem. Without external input, there's nothing to challenge those beliefs. The real danger is that isolation creates an echo chamber where harmful ideas can grow unchecked. Over time, someone may develop a completely distorted view of reality, where extreme actions feel reasonable because there's no one to say otherwise. Gradual moral erosion. Evil rarely appears all at once. Instead, it builds through small compromises that seem insignificant at the time. It starts with bending a rule, then breaking it, then justifying it. This is where it gets dangerous. Each step feels only slightly worse than the last, making the progression almost invisible. But here's the problem. The brain adapts quickly, normalizing each new level of behavior. The real danger is that by the time someone reaches an extreme point, it no longer feels extreme to them. It feels like a natural continuation of choices they've already made. And that's what makes it so powerful. Not a single moment of transformation, but a slow, almost unnoticeable slide into something far darker. And if you want more videos that break down the hidden patterns of human behavior, make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss what's next. If you found this interesting, leave a like. It helps more than you think.